And now, ladies and gentlemen,
Put your thumbs up and say it's Tickety Boo.
Tickety Boo.
Tickety boo, tickety boo, everything's tickety boo.
Tickety Boo, son. Tickety Boo. Welcome to another episode of Tickety Boo. There was a time where I personally would do absolutely anything to avoid my triggers. You know those feelings? Someone says something or something happens around you and suddenly you're flooded with emotion. Maybe your heart's racing, your palms are sweating. But what if those triggers aren't actually there to ruin your day? They're actually there to be your teacher. They are lessons in disguise. So today I'm here with Iona and Ian and Barney, who's hiding somewhere in the background. So to kick off, can you guys tell me the last time where you felt triggered and how you reacted?
I'd say it's when I feel that I have no control. I mean, no control is an illusion, but it's things that are out with my control, whether it's technology goes down, it could be something gets broken, or you can't figure out how you've got to fix something. Who do I phone? You get put on hold. So it's all those things that I actually have no control over, and I've lost that control. I don't know if our listeners can relate to that. There's nothing we can do about it, besides throwing the computer out the window, for example. That's not going to fix it. And it's really in those moments just slowing down, going, check yourself, Iona.
What about you, Ian?
I actually had one on the airport, on the way to the airport this morning.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. Not so long ago. Well, actually, a good few years ago now. I had somebody fall in front of my car from the passenger side, and I hit them in the head with the car, and unfortunately, they died as a result. So this morning, I had somebody stepping out into traffic, and they're leaning over the car as I came past.
Oh my gosh! Right.
And
yeah.
it's an absolute trigger, but it's that thing where I don't know what that person is going to do.
Yeah.
And almost like being a bit out of control of the situation. But that, for me, was a big trigger. It kind of fired things off.
It's really weird how triggers show up in your life. I had one the other week. I've been waiting for some news about a contract in my other business. And I've been waiting a long time. And I kind of tried to push it to the back of mind. And then an email came in with an attachment regarding to this news that I've been waiting for, and I suddenly got full fight or flight.
Yeah.
I had no idea where it was coming from, but yeah, just bam, just hit me out of the blue. Now, don't get me wrong, when I say full flight or flight, there was anxiety there, but I know what to do. I know why it was that. I wasn't like, oh my God, get me out of here kind of thing. So I think it's really important that we talk about triggers, because they don't necessarily need to be something that we fear. It's actually part of us working with us to kind of help us. I think the difference is when you feel the trigger, do you instinctively shut down? Because that then is not healthy.
Yeah, and I think that's really important. People think when they're triggered, they're going to react and do something or respond in a certain way. But we also, there's the fawn, the freeze, but people do nothing. And that is also, it's a trigger. And our triggers are generally based on how we learned to behave and interact in our childhood. So they're part of our unconscious programming and behaviors. We all have them.
Yeah, I think I kind of almost don't want to use the word trigger. I kind of think they're more of anchors. Like they're tying you back into past events that you've maybe not fully resolved or done the work on.
Well, a lot of the time it's just a way of you consciously sort of directing your focus. It's like that one with the car this morning. Yeah. I knew, look out from that person that's coming in from the side of the road. It's just a way of sort of focusing something that you feel that could be a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think so. You've got a healthier relationship with that trigger because you can understand where it's coming from, and really what your brain in that moment is saying to you: be careful, be aware,
be alert.
Yeah. That trigger becomes a problem when you don't want to go and drive the car. Yeah. Where your trigger is dictating your behavior. And it's interesting how our triggers evolve and change over time. I was just talking about that email that I had about the contract. Old me would have shut the laptop lid down and gone, I don't want to read it, and would have spent days So I would have avoided
Yeah.
the trigger, where now I can go, oh, that's interesting. The trigger's just gone off. I'm a little bit, anxious about what the outcome could be.
What a perfect analogy. Because you shut the laptop, but it's still there,
It's
needing to be read and needing to be dealt with.
Well, what I would have been doing is constantly re-triggering myself, the fact that I need to go and trigger myself. So you stay stuck in those moments. And I think that's the key thing here, is that if you spend your whole life avoiding triggers, then actually you're impeding your healing. We've talked about in the previous episode about healing, and actually triggers aren't something to be feared. They're something to be leaned into.
Yeah. And also, I mean, there's triggers like getting cut off in traffic. It can be a person that regularly triggers you. There's so many different things that can be triggering. And something that I love to get clients to do is just when you catch yourself in that moment, noticing you're being triggered, before you've thrown the computer out the window, maybe, or shut the laptop, it's like just asking yourself, isn't that interesting? So you start to recognize the behavior. It's like, look what I'm doing. So you're observing it as opposed to reacting. And then you can make a choice on how you're going to react, and maybe look at the email, maybe just like walk away from the computer, or, take a deep breath if it's a person. But it's like looking at this, isn't that interesting? It's a really great question.
The thing is, constantly avoiding or running from the trigger is like pressing the snooze button on your alarm clock.
Yeah.
At some point, you're going to have to wake up and face it, aren't you? And the amount of energy that we invest into avoiding triggers is actually about the equal amount of effort a handful of times to go in and actually dealing with the trigger.
Yeah. How many of us have put off doing something we don't want to do, or avoided a scenario, and actually it wasn't as bad as we thought, or it didn't take as long as we thought it would, actually dealing with the email, and then it's done, because otherwise it takes up space in our mind.
Yeah. I actually got triggered the other day when my new council tax bill came through. I don't want to get all political, but it was the injustice trigger. However, it's that, we've talked about this before, pressing the pause button and going, what is this trigger trying to do for me in that moment? Rather than this trigger is trying to get me to run or freeze or fawn, as you've said, because they can hold a lot of power over you if you let them.
Do you think understanding where your triggers stem from?
Yeah, I actually think awareness, and then go, I can see why this is happening. I was talking to students the other week on one of the training courses, and we were talking about anchors. I prefer to call a trigger an anchor back to a place and time. And I talked about these anchors in a positive way. So we've all had the experience of minding our own business, and then a song comes on the radio, or and it takes you back to a holiday or that school disco. You just transport it back in time very quickly. That is basically a trigger.
School disco says a whole other trigger.
Let's not go there. But it's a positive trigger, if that kind of makes sense to you. It tends to take you back to a happier time in life. When we're talking about triggers in this context, it takes you back to a point in life where you felt some kind of discomfort in a situation, and your survival brain's going, is this happening again? Do I need to take you into full fight or flight? And actually, it's putting the spotlight, the torch on. There's a bit of healing here.
And I think I'd like to add here that it doesn't mean we have to actually go and unpick the minute details of something that triggered us and have to unpack, because people might be worried, actually, I know that this thing that's triggering me is actually very traumatic. We don't need to always unpick it word for word, like note by note, and understand exactly what happened.
No.
It's like we can do our healing and work through our triggers so much easier than that. So I don't want our listeners to go, oh no, I don't want to relate to that, and put it away in a box.
Yeah, I think the other thing is as well that some triggers you will carry for the rest of your life, but you can lead a very happy, good life.
Yes.
Other triggers can be completely collapsed. So like for me, who had a panic attack on a plane once, it was a horrific experience. I had massive triggers about getting on planes. But through gradual exposure and the right kind of therapy, and then having positive experiences flying, those triggers collapsed. So that trigger told me I need to do the work to help my brain to realize that the plane wasn't the threat. It was how I was once feeling on a plane. That was the issue. There's some interesting stats around this. They reckon about 73% of adults have unresolved triggers.
Yeah.
That's a massive number, isn't it?
I do.
Yeah, I do.
For sure.
Yeah, I do. But I think what we're talking about this episode is moving yourself into that place where you can calmly or be calmer, observing your trigger, but not shifting into a behavior that's not empowering, that's not healthy.
Yeah. So moving on from the question, first of all, for me, getting people to say, isn't that interesting? Observing it and then asking themselves, what do I need in this moment? So let's say it's technology. Like, I need to walk away and maybe go make a cup of tea and not crack open a bottle of wine, but it's what do I need in this moment? Because then you start to take care of your needs. We briefly touched on this as well in the last episode. It's really important that you start to recognize this. And as we said, it's the awareness.
Name it to tame it.
Name it to tame it. I like that.
And the other thing is sometimes looking back at your triggers, it's how you react to the triggers, and then you can look at how you've reacted previously to the same trigger and go, okay, that didn't pan out very well. I'm going to get into trouble if I react like that. Or just learning from, if the trigger hasn't gone, but you can sort of have more control over it by just looking back at your previous reactions to it, how you dealt with it and what the outcomes of that were.
Yeah, I think, I was guilty in the past of being a runner when it came to triggers. Not physically, I mean emotionally. I would move into a space where I felt more comfortable. So I would flee.
Oh, I would fight.
But emotionally, I'm talking about fleeing. I wouldn't necessarily run away from the situation because I wasn't really built for marathons, to be honest with you, and I'd always be running. But you have to realise that running from your triggers is actually exhausting. It's more exhausting than leaning into the triggers and doing the work.
Yeah. But going back to relating to what you both just said, I was a fighter. So I look back at some things that have triggered me in the past, and what I would naturally do if I thought I was being cornered, I'd go back to that bullied teenager where I wouldn't let you pick on me or mine.
Right.
So now I've had instances, maybe when I'm in a fairly low state, but you feel cornered or somebody's acting inappropriately, and you react as in, no, you're not bullying me, pal. And you're not bullying, but you take on a defensive posture. You almost hit fight mode.
Well, the interesting thing about those triggers are they literally regress you to the age you were when the trigger was established.
Well, this is the thing, and this is what bothers me, because I don't actually aim to have physical confrontation at all, but I do have this thing. You want to bully me or mine? I don't think so.
Yeah.
Which most people, I think virtually everybody will relate to.
Yeah.
But I have got enough in the bank, I've got enough life experience and enough tools to be able to recognise what's insignificant and what shouldn't be triggering me. And sometimes it's a bit disappointing when you take that sort of defensive posture on rather than just walking away or using those other, and just not giving that person or that trigger the power it deserves.
Which it actually, so that should, to me, that says that there is a part still at play that needs to be looked at, because it's not actually about what the person's done, it's actually what it makes you believe is going to happen or you think is going to happen.
That angry teenager comes out, which then leaves my grown-up self wanting peace, because I'm not really happy.
Conflicted.
Yeah, absolutely.
Different.
And like I say, these aren't huge violent reactions or anything. No. It's just things where I'm just giving people a reaction that they want.
Yeah.
And really, I know better.
Yeah. The thing is, it's like, what is this showing me?
Yeah.
That's the key thing here. Like for me, when that trigger went the other day about the email, the trigger really was, this is actually quite important. And it could, there was, I wouldn't say there was a lot riding on it, but it was important. So that anxiety was like, this is important. But, old me would have been like, oh my God, like catastrophization. In fact, probably would have got somebody else to open the email for me. So that's when you show you that a trigger's got you in a headlock.
Yeah.
And I do think we have those triggers that tap you on the shoulder now and again and go, Peepo, I'm still here. And as long as there's not this big emotional outburst or unhealthy behaviour, I think that's the key thing, isn't it?
Yeah. It's about being reflective.
Yeah.
And not reactive.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Or just giving your brain, giving your logical, sensible mind that half a second to just catch up with.
And I think it's really in becoming aware, because there's various exercises people can do, not whilst they're being triggered, because when you're being triggered, the worst thing, and I've had it said to me before, when someone tells you, just breathe, just take a deep breath, like in that moment when you're being triggered, that's the last thing you want to do. But what I want to talk into is like those tools, those things that you can, like, it's your trigger toolbox, how you can actually start to build that resilience around this and that awareness. Perhaps we'll share them down in the show notes or do an attachment. There's two that I wanted to mention, and people can start to look at their strengths and its strength awareness, so you can start to see where you are reacting positively or negatively. It's all very self-explanatory. Rather than getting you to look it up online, we've just decided to make some PDFs for you. And the other one is a red light, green light activities. So you can start to look at those activities that drain you. And so let's say we're talking about triggers. And so as it comes up, you'll have documented it, you'll do this for, let's say, 6 days, but then you start to recognize the pattern. What happened just before you were triggered? How can you make sure you're not going to react? So it's, again, anything that you can do to bring that awareness to yourself and your triggers, how you react, because we don't want you beating up yourself. Like, things are going to happen. And I can't throw the computer out the window every time I get annoyed with it. I've got to learn to deal with it.
The thing is, my opinion is that triggers are feedback loops. It's an opportunity for that data to come back in. The key thing is, in the moment when you're being triggered, the only thing you should be focusing on is emotional regulation.
Yes.
Taking a breath, calming your central nervous system down. You do the work when you're not triggered. In a controlled, approached way. You see all these things on the internet when you're triggered about do all these things and do that. Focus on your breath, bring your attention back to now. And then afterwards, when you're calmer and you're in your better space, you then reflect and you start to break it.
Yeah, because the nice thing about doing these exercises, or however you want to choose to work on this and bring awareness, like we're using our brain as a muscle, so we start to rewire our own brains like that. Neurologically we can change. So that's what it is. It's in the preparation of this, knowing that breathing helps you. So rather than just maybe taking those pauses and breathing when you're getting triggered, which quite frankly that's like a red flag to a bull when people are telling me that when I used to get
just breathe.
Just breathe. Like when I would get really triggered and I'm thinking of a particular person. But it's like you start to learn how you're going to react. And so you start to build that resilience so that, okay, I'm breathing. So it's not like, oh God, now I've got to breathe. And building that strength awareness of, okay, well, actually I can see what's starting to happen. Or this activity, when I'm trying to deal with my council tax, I get triggered by that. So what am I going to do instead? So it's starting to notice where these triggers are and what happens.
There are other things you can do though. We talked earlier in the episode about how we have positive triggers, positive anchors to positive places. You can set up an anchor to a place where you feel calm and happy. So as the negative trigger fires, you can fire off a positive one to create balance and bring balance back into it. I think the key things is, you need to look at triggers like a messy bedroom. You can keep kicking stuff under the bed and shoving it under the rug, but at some point you're going to have to go in there and tidy up because you keep tripping over all the stuff. But as you sort through the mess and pick through the stuff, you find value and you create space for clarity where you can kind of do the work. That's the issue. The issue is if you constantly run, then you're going to spend the rest of your life running. But if you also think you shouldn't be triggered, you're setting yourself up to fail. That's the difference. So if nothing else, if you're watching this, if you're spending a lot of time avoiding discomfort, healing is not found in comfort. It's found, isn't it, in those moments of stepping into the discomfort of the trigger. recognizing that moment where something's happened, I can rationalize it, I can see why it's happened, and taking some of the intensity out of it. So it's almost like each trigger is like a teacher just nudging you forwards towards a better life.
Do you think if you're in the wrong headspace for a certain situation that you know is going to, that you're more vulnerable to be triggered, that's a good time to just say, do you know what, I'll do this another time?
Actually, the example I gave you with the email, I wasn't well at the time. I had quite a bad cold and I was tired, and so
sleep. Oh my gosh, sleep is medicine.
Deprived. Yeah, I think if you're physically or emotionally tired, your ability to emotionally regulate is definitely diminished. So triggers feel so much more intense when you're not in a good headspace.
Yeah,
they really do. And you need to be aware of that. Like, I'm finding it really hard at the moment to manage this trigger because I am tired, I am run down, I'm very stressed out.
Or hungry.
That's
another one.
Yeah, hungry. Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I think they're much harder to deal with.
So, as well as your sort of headspace, I certainly know I have a lot less tolerance for certain things if I'm in a bad mood, if I'm stressed or whatever that might be. So how about things like alcohol? If again, talking about ways to get yourself triggered, going into a social group where you're not comfortable, you have an absolute skinful, and then expecting to be able to regulate your triggers.
I think if you start taking the sharp edges off triggers with unhealthy coping mechanisms, it never ends well. The trigger is going to keep coming back until you deal with it. We can take this back to social anxiety. That's a trigger. You feel socially uncomfortable, so you rely on alcohol to have a few drinks to make you feel calmer. Well, you're not really dealing with the issue, are you? You're not really dealing with the trigger, which most of the triggers are. I'm worried that I'm not accepted or liked or good enough or going to be judged or criticised or whatever it is. That there's a fear at play that needs to be looked at. Or is it the people and the environment that's the problem?
Change the people, change the environment.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, sometimes maybe you're not the problem.
Yeah.
But we think. But if you end up in these social situations, you find yourself angry and frustrated and agitated, maybe the trigger is a valid trigger. Just saying.
Yeah.
I put a post out ages ago on Instagram about if you're being constantly triggered, maybe you're not the problem.
Yeah.
And a few people kind of made some interesting comments about, look about what's going on around you kind of thing. I think this is a really good episode. I mean, it's a fairly short one, but I think it's a really important one. When we looked at the stats, 70-odd% of adults have unresolved triggers. If nothing else, and you're listening to this episode, maybe next time you're triggered, write it down.
Yeah.
Where were you? What did you experience? What were you thinking? And then take a step back and take a look at it and start to see it for what it is. Does it align with something that's happened in your past that maybe needs to be looked at? Not just saying this, but genuinely every single day in the therapy room, collapsing triggers.
Yeah.
And triggers can be collapsed in under 3 minutes. They can be collapsed so quickly in the right environment. So if you have a life full of triggers, do the work. I think that's, have you guys got anything you would like to say before we wrap the episode up?
I think you summed it up beautifully.
What, do the work?
Do the work.
Do the work. Well, that brings an end to this episode on Your Triggers Are Your Teachers. If you're watching us on YouTube, please click the bell icon. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple, please click that subscribe button and you'll get notified when we release new episodes. And we look forward to catching up with you in the next episode very soon.
If you or someone close to you needs to access mental health support, please contact your GP. Or, if it's out with normal office hours, get in touch with NHS 24 on 111. Alternatively, contact the Samaritans on 116 123. All calls are free of charge from any phone. You can also find more support information on the Tickety Boo website, ticketyboopodcast.co.uk.